How's it going, everybody? This is Indie Dave, and you're watching Indie Dave Comics on YouTube. Thanks again for stopping by and listening to my rambling, monotone reviews of indie comics. Today we're going to cover a comic called Creed. Now, I'm familiar with the comic as in when I was a kid and collecting. I remember I was aware of it being around. I never really collected it as a kid. But opening up this book, this is another more nostalgia video. This is a #1 issue, but it's in a limited series kind of thing. Creed was written, drawn, conceived by Trent Kaniuga. When he started the series, they were selling 40,000 copies. He was 16 years old. So, I mean, the art's really amazing. And there's something about the art, it's very 1990s kind of indie art. Which, it's almost impossible to describe what makes that different than today. It's not better or worse. I'm not saying that all indie art's bad or anything like that for today. It's just the style that it's done in is very 1990s, and it's very similar to like a Sam Keith or a Simon Bisley, that kind of stuff. There's just a certain something about it that's different. It stands out from indie art today. So we're going to go ahead and open up this book, and I'll show you one of the things really that stands out that a lot of people, maybe some people wouldn't notice. It's very subtle. And it's the lettering. If you notice, the lettering, they didn't have digital lettering. I don't believe so at the time when this comic came out in 1996. They didn't have digital lettering. So when you hired a letterer, what they did was they made the little box, and then they draw lines. Every line would be, they measured it out, and then they had a little pattern of how they drew, how they lettered how they made each letter. One of the things you'll also notice is with these lettering boxes, you'll notice the shading is this, and this is something I imagine the colorist did, and it's just kind of an interesting effect, the way they shaded it and went from light to dark here. It doesn't show up as well on camera, but you can see it. It's a little more dramatic in real life. There we go, Trent Kaniuga. This one was a cranial disorder. I guess Creed's main power was that he could go back and forth between the dream world. This was kind of a common theme. The Max actually covered something very similar. And if you look at the way the eyes are drawn, and it's like I said, I'm not an art critic specifically. I never studied art or anything like that. But it's just something that the way the faces were shaped, the way the art was, it's kind of rougher. I mean, none of this was done digitally. This was all drawn on a board by hand. Again, everything was done by hand. The lettering was done by hand. What this particular issue is I guess his best friend is back in the dream world and he's stuck in the regular world. There's some issue with his hands, I guess. His hands are becoming more cartoony, even in his comic, even in the world of the comic and the real life of his comic. He's down to 3 fingers, and his hands are just huge, and his feet are just huge. And I think it's some kind of leftover. Maybe it's an issue that'll get fixed later. That'll get resolved later on in the story. But basically, his best friend has left him, and this is kind of dealing with that loss. His best friend's in the dream world, and he's back in the real world. Again, I'm not sure how to describe how the art is different. You can see some of the... you can tell it was written by a kid that was in high school. They're talking about going to the mall, and just kind of the language they used. This is a Shia. Yeah, like, yeah, right. And he's got a, I mean, look at this. He's got a phone that's attached to the wall. uh, this, you can see just some of the stuff here. Look at the way the hair is drawn. I mean, I guess some people, this kind of a Ramita kind of has a similar style too. And I think he comes mostly from that era as well. But it's very, it's like I said, difficult to describe. It could very well be that because even when I was collecting back in that time, I collected a lot of indie stuff. I started on Ninja Turtles and things like that. To me, the Marvel and the DC, it all kind of looked the same. Until you started getting artists like McFarlane and Liefeld and that kind of thing. But this is the kind of thing that I was into at the time. And it just brings back waves of memories. Let's look at... talk about 90s. Here's a 90s thing. Wearing your t-shirt over your long sleeve shirt. That was just that was something I remember I used to do a lot. It was kind of the fashion at the time. I don't see it all that much now. It's not really a hipster thing to do. Kanye he even throws himself in his book a little bit. At least he drops his own name later on in this book, and it's kind of funny. He does a little joke. There you go. He does this joke about, now that Trent boy from science class, he's all man. They're like, Trent Kaniuga? Girl, something's seriously wrong with you. So, I mean, it's one of those things you can tell he was kind of a younger kid, and that was, I mean, it's a funny little joke. So, like I said, I wasn't going to talk about the story too much with this, but basically he has this crush on this girl, and this girl finds this crystal, and the crystal has got essentially the bad guy who's in the other world and wants to come over to this world. This kind of dream state stuff, and I don't know, maybe they still do it nowadays. I remember this being kind of a theme back then. Just another little thing. Flying cyber frog. I think Trent was actually friends with Ethan Van Sciver. So, I mean, they did crossovers. I think they even did a Creed crossover with the Ninja Turtles. Like, a lot of these indie artists like to kind of get together. Let's see. Alright, so I know I didn't really go into the story that much with this one, but I'm kind of coming in on this one in the middle. I remember I seen Creed. I remember it in the comic shop, or at least I remember seeing advertisements for it in the comic. I never really picked up a Creed comic. I recommend, if you're going through your bargain bins, you're going through your $1 bin, or you're just looking for some back issues, pick up a Creed comic, pick up the Max comic, those kind of things. It's an interesting to look at it and compare it to today. It's almost like bigger and blockier, and they really went into some serious detail with some of these things. And it's just interesting to compare kind of an older style. Comics at the time were really changing. Like you had, you know, this is about the time, or it's just a little after the time when Image, you know, broke out and all those guys. So I'm just going to go ahead and end this kind of weird, rambly review. Reiterate some of the things that really stand out to me are the lettering, and it's I don't know why, it just kind of it's a very subtle thing, but if you look at, because it was all hand done, all the letters are just slightly a little bit different. You're not going to get the uniformity of digitally done. I'm not putting down people who do lettering digitally. I'm not doing anything like that. It's just a different style, and it's something that you notice, or you subtly notice if you really look at it and compare. And there isn't different fonts. Pretty much there was like a standard font that everybody used because that's what fit best to make the comics look. They wanted, you know, they didn't want different lettering, between different letterists from different books, because, you know, obviously one guy wasn't doing every single book at the time. Even Marvel was doing this, of course. But it's one of those subtle little things, looking at comics now and looking at comics then. I'm going to go ahead and end this kind of rambly review. Pick up a Creed comic. I'm going to link you also at the end of the video. I'm going to put a link to Trent Kaniuga actually talks about his history with Creed. And it was a really pretty cool video about it. So I'm going to put that link in the at the end of this video for you to go ahead and click on. I'm Indie Dave. This is Indie Dave Comics. Like and subscribe. And y'all have a good day.
Please hang up and try again.